Hi, everybody. Welcome to the channel. My name's Jim. This is Great Books, Big Ideas. We are marching through our 10-year reading plan from the Great Books of the Western World, second edition. And next up today, we're going to talk about Rabelais, Gargantua and Pantagruel, books 1 and 2. This is just an introduction with some background and a few discussion questions to get you thinking about the book. Hopefully you've read books 1 and 2 already. If not, this will whet your appetite for it. Rabelais was one of the most brilliant troublemakers in Renaissance literature. What makes him great is his exuberant style, his fearless fusion of the sacred and the profane, emphasis more on the profane, I think. He didn't just write, he invented language. He stuffs his books with enormous, chaotic catalogs and thousands of new words. It's a wild prose party, blending his scholarly knowledge of Latin with street slang, French vernacular, and it's a revolutionary act that breaks all the rules of dignified writing. He is the bull in the china shop. His style is by turns gargantuan, prolix, hyperbolic, absurd, vulgar, scatological, sloppy, Latinate, erudite, scholastically excessive, brainstormy, improvisational, fearless, bold, brassy, boozy, baldy, ballsy, frolicsome, just explosive all over the page. And he uses this wild style for a serious purpose, satire. Rabelais was a champion of humanism, a believer in human potential. This is what the Renaissance is known for, in part. His irreverent humor and intellectual freedom is put into the service of his humanistic project. He always is mocking the laziness of monks, the self-important lawyers and legal scholars, the rigid, idiotic educational system of his time in Renaissance France. He's relentless, he's ravenous, he's raunchy, and he's always writing with a smile. He is a comic genius. His heroes, the giants, Gargantua and Pantagruel, with their ginormous appetites for food and drink and lust and knowledge. These are symbols of the untamed life force that was fueling the Renaissance as it's kind of rising out of the Middle Ages. Rabelais teaches us that true wisdom is not found in musty old books and laws, but in our experience of the world and our questioning of authority and our embracing of the joys that life has to offer. And he gives us a hint of this ideal society that is not bound by rules by depicting the utopian society of Thelem, proving that he wasn't just tearing down the old world, he was designing or envisioning a freer world. And his literature is kind of opening up those vistas for us to imagine our way into that future. Let me give you a little bit of background about Rabelais. This was culled from the Great Books of the Western World intro. His years are approximately 1495 to 1553. From France, he was educated to be a monk. He was ordained as a priest at the Franciscan monastery of Fontenay-le-Comte. He continued his studies in humanistic training, learning the Greek language and so forth. And in 1524, he transferred to the Benedictine order. In 1530, he became a secular priest, and he wandered around the countryside, He turned also to the study of medicine. So you have a lot of medical knowledge infused throughout Gargantua and Pantagruel. He received his bachelor's degree in 1531. He also dabbled in acting. Now, by 1532, he was a practicing physician at the Hotel Dieu in Lyon. He now turns his attention to literature, writing. He begins writing Pantagruel first, even though Gargantua is the first in the book. In terms of composition, he writes the first volume of Pantagruel earlier, and then he wrote a prequel with Gargantua. He spent some time in Rome, and he petitioned for absolution from the violation of his monastic vows, because these books he was writing were getting him into trouble. He was getting condemned for them. He did receive a bull of absolution in 1536, which freed him from censure, at least for a time. He continued practicing medicine and entered the diplomatic service in 1538. In 1545, he was allowed to print his book by the king, but it was banned by the Sorbonne. Resistance to publication of Gargantua and Pantagruel continued up until the time of Rabelais' death in 1553. So what is the picture that we get of Rabelais, the man, considering this biography and the book that he wrote? Well, he's a Renaissance man. He's educated in ecclesiastical and humanistic fields, plus medicine, plus drama, plus literature. He encompasses it all. He is known for writing in the French vernacular, and he contributed to the making of the French language. One contemporary called him the father of our idiom. Rabelais mastered many writing styles. He can do it all. So you don't just have vernacular in his book. You've got Latin, you've got Greek words, you just got everything from all different fields. It is a mélange. His lust for learning and experience is on full display in this great book. So let me give you a quick overview of the book, and we'll read a sample chapter too, just so you can get a taste of it. Book one, I want to first quote from the prologue, because this really sets the tone for what you're about to read. We are in the realm of comedy. And in our year one reading plan, we've already done a couple comedies by Aristophanes, the ancient Greek playwright. And now we're coming back in the Renaissance period with one of the funniest books of all time. So the book one starts like this. The inestimable life of the great Gargantua, father of Pantagruel, heretofore composed by M. Alcofribas, abstractor of the Quintessence, a book full of Pantagruelism. Here's his poem. To the readers. Good friends, my readers, who peruse this book, be not offended whilst on it ye look. Denude yourselves of all depraved affection, for it contains no badness nor infection. 'Tis true that it brings forth to you no birth of any value, but in point of mirth, thinking therefore how sorrow might your mind consume, I could no apter subject find. 1 inch of joy surmounts of grief a span, because to laugh is proper to the man. So you are in for a comic joyride here. Book one is an account of the life of the giant Gargantua, father of Pantagruel. It's his origin story. It talks about his upbringing, his education. He receives tutoring from Ponocrates. We learn much about the Renaissance ideal of education from some of these chapters. And the rest of book one is preoccupied with a war, the war between Gargantua's people and the people of Lerne, which begins on the silliest of pretexts imaginable, a dispute over the purchase of some cakes. After many battles, the war concludes, and book one finishes with a description of the utopian community Theleme. And book 2 starts with the ancient genealogy of Pantagruel. So we turn to the son. His birth, remember, this was the first thing he wrote. His birth and infancy and adolescence and education are covered. Pantagruel helps judge a lawsuit between the nobles Lord Kissbreach and Lord Suckfist. And then chapters 14 to 22 cover the exploits of Penurge, Pantagruel's crony. He is a very amusing and amazing rascal in his own right. And the latter part of book 2 is concerned with a war as well, this time between the Despots and the Utopia. In chapter 30, Pantagruel's tutor Epistemon is found dead, but is revived, and then he speaks of his trip to the underworld. So there's some echoes of like the old Greco-Roman epics here, where they always went to the underworld and came back and reported what they saw and heard. Here, everything is topsy-turvy. The monarchs, the warlords, and the prelates have become, of this world, have become menial workers in hell, and the philosophers and the needy from this world in the underworld have become lords. I want to talk a little bit about Rabelais' prose style here and read you a sample chapter, but I can make a couple comments about it up front. This is, in most respects, a very coarse, vulgar style, writing in the vernacular. The translation here, by the way, is amazing, and I can't usually say that about Great Books of the Western World volumes, but the translation by Sir Thomas Urquhart and Peter Motteau, I don't know what date it was translated, but this translation is brilliant, and it's very, very lively, like so much fun to read. But anyway, that Rabelais' style, I think, is well captured by these translators. What do we make of his style? Well, let me turn to this guidebook. I don't know if any of you have these. You can find these in the used bookstores. These Great Ideas Program volumes, they give you nice overviews and discussion questions, and I'll frequently lean on them for these videos. But on page 190 of this Imaginative Literature Part 1 volume, let me read you what they have to say about this. For most people, the term Rabelaisian does not connote the fantastic adventures, social satire, cultural interests, and reforming spirit, but rather a frank and coarse handling of man's excretory functions and sexual activities. It's raunchy. The common connotation is partly correct, for this kind of thing runs throughout the whole book, even in some of the most elevated passages, and seems essential to Rabelais' literary person and character. He does not merely mention these things in passing or deal with them in correct, painstaking, realistic fashion with the idea of making an authentic description of human life. He dwells on these things at great length, devotes all his wonderful humor, gusto, verbal power, imagination, and extreme exaggeration to the affairs of the toilet and the sexual embrace. Urquhart and Motteau, the translators, and all other honest translators have given us the Anglo-Saxon equivalents of Rabelais' earthy French original. Now, as to the matter of offense, undoubtedly many of us will be shocked, offended, and repelled by some of the passages in this work. I hope you won't be, but some prudish people might be. We have to go back to Aristophanes to find anything like this, and we've read a couple of Aristophanes earlier in the playlist. The Clouds and Lysistrata, namely. And even Chaucer may seem decorous and pure in comparison. But the situation is not quite the same as it was in the era when George Saintsbury wrote of Rabelais that the general taste having been considerably refined since the 16th century, Rabelais has in part become nearly unreadable. Whether Rabelais is indecent by some absolute standard is another matter and open for discussion. That in itself can be a discussion question. How do we treat the vulgarity in Rabelais? But instead of talking about the vulgarity, let me share some with you. So I'm going to read to you chapter 11 from Gargantua, the first volume. And it's a short chapter, And just listen to his style and let it wash over you. This will really give you a sense of how comically exuberant Rabelais is. And it's discussing the youthful age of Gargantua. So Gargantua has been born, now he's a child. Gargantua, from 3 years upwards unto 5, was brought up and instructed in all convenient discipline by the commandment of his father, and spent that time like the other little children of the country, that is, in drinking, eating, and sleeping, in eating, sleeping, and drinking, and in sleeping, drinking, and eating. Still he wallowed and rolled himself up and down in the mire and dirt. He blotted and smutched his face with any kind of scurvy stuff. He trod down his shoes in the heel. At the flies he did oftentimes yawn, and ran very heartily after the butterflies, the empire whereof belonged to his father. He pissed in his shoes, shit in his shirt, and wiped his nose on his sleeve. He did let his snot and snivel fall in his pottage, and dabbled, paddled, and slobbered everywhere. He would drink in his slipper, and ordinarily rub his belly against a pannier. He sharpened his teeth with a top, washed his hands with his broth, and combed his head with a bowl. He would sit down betwixt two stools, and his arse to the ground, would cover himself with a wet sack, and drink in, eating of his soup. He did eat his cake sometimes without bread, would bite in laughing, and laugh in biting. Oftentimes did he spit in the basin, and fart for fatness, piss against the sun, and hide himself in the water for fear of rain. He would strike out of the cold iron, be often in the dumps, and frig and wriggle it. He would flay the fox, say the ape's pater noster, return to his sheep, and turn the hogs to the hay. He would beat the dogs before the lion, put the plow before the oxen, and claw where it did not itch. He would pump one to draw somewhat out of him, by griping all would hold fast nothing, and always eat his white bread first. He shoed the geese, tickled himself to make himself laugh, and was cook ruffin in the kitchen. Made a mock at the gods, would cause sing Magnificat at matins, and found it very convenient so to do. He would eat cabbage and shite beets, new flies in a dish of milk, and would make them lose their feet. He would scrape paper, blur parchment, then run away as hard as he could. He would pull at the kid's leather, or vomit up his dinner, then reckon without his host. He would beat the bushes without catching the birds, thought the moon was made of green cheese, and that bladders are lanterns. Out of one sack he would take 2 multures or fees for grinding, would act the ass's part to get some bran, and of his fist would make a mallet. He took the cranes at the first leap, and would have the mail coats to be made link after link. He always looked a gift horse in the mouth, leaped from the cock to the ass, and put one right between 2 green. By robbing Peter, he paid Paul. He kept the moon from the wolves, and hoped to catch larks if ever the heavens should fall. He did make of necessity virtue, of such bread such pottage, and cared as little for the peeled as for the shaven. Every morning he did cast up his gorge, and his father's little dogs eat out of the dish with him, and he with them. He would bite their ears, and they would scratch his nose. He would blow in their arses, and they would lick his chaps. But hearken, good fellows, the spigot all ill betake you, and whirl round your brains, if you do not give ear. This little lecher was always groping his nurses and governesses, upside down, arsey-versey, topsy-turvy, Harry Bourriquet, with a yako, hike, hick, yo, handling them very rudely, in jumbling and tumbling them to keep them going, for he had already begun to exercise the tools and put his codpiece in practice. Which codpiece, or braguette, his governesses did every day deck up and adorn with fair nosegays, curious rubies, sweet flowers, and fine silken tufts, and very pleasantly would pass their time in taking you know what between their fingers, and dandling it till it did revive and creep up to the bulk and stiffness of a suppository or street medallion, which is a hard rolled up salve spread upon leather. Then did they burst out in laughing when they saw it lift up its ears as if the sport had liked them. One of them would call it her pillicock, her fiddle-diddle, her staff of love, her tickle-gizzard, her gentle tittler, another her sugar-plum, her kingo, her old rally, her touch-trap, her flap-dowdle, another again her branch of coral, her placket-racket, her Cyprian scepter, her titbit, her bob lady. And some of the other women would give these names: my Roger, my cockatoo, my nimble-wimble, bush-beater, claw-buttock, eavesdropper, picklock, pioneer, bully-ruffin, smell-smock, trouble-gusset, my lusty live sausage, my crimson chitterlin, rump-splitter, shoved devil, down right to it, stiff and stout, in and to, at her again, my coney borrow ferret, wily beguily, my pretty rogue. It belongs to me, said one. It is mine, said the others. What, quoth a third, shall I have no share in it? By my faith, I will cut it then. Ha, to cut it, said the other, would hurt him. Madam, do you cut little children's things? Were his cut off, he would be then Monsieur Sans Queue, the curtailed master, and that he might play and sport himself after the manner of the other little children of the country, they made him a fair weather whirljack at the wings of the windmill of Rabelais. That is chapter 11 from Gargantua by Rabelais. Do you see what I mean? The vulgar style, the exaggeration, hyperbole, the cataloging. It's just really brilliant stuff. Just one of a kind. This guy, he really was. I cannot help but think of Monty Python when I read Rabelais. That show, that franchise is probably the closest analog I can think of from contemporary culture, especially the work of Terry Gilliam, who did the animations for the Monty Python TV show, but also was a film director in films like Brazil and others. This sort of larger-than-life, prolix, ribald, like just all over the place kind of style, that with like a lot of comic genius mixed in. The hijinks, the high mixed with low, the absurd, the excessive, the ribald, all the wordplay really makes me think of Monty Python. And you might also think of Python films like The Life of Brian, which is very satirical about religion and the adherence to authority, which is something you get out of Rabelais. But in terms of literary influence, I also think of other authors that you see represented in the great books of the Western World set and beyond. So Lawrence Stern's Tristram Shandy, 1759 to 1767. That novel is a direct heir to Rabelais, another comic masterpiece. Stern definitely is learning from Rabelais' long digressions, the absurdity, the typographic tricks, the philosophical expostulations, these reveling in language and bodily functions all come out of Rabelais. Also, do we have Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels without Rabelais? I don't think so. Swift's sharp satire of political and religious authority, his use of grotesque size or minuscule size seems to be a major debt to Rabelais as well. And I was thinking also of a more modern writer who I read a lot of in 2024, and that is James Joyce. Do we have works like Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake without Rabelais? I feel that Joyce must have been influenced by Rabelais. The polyglot wordplay, the encyclopedic lists, the scatological humor, the profound blending of the everyday experience of the human body with higher mythological and educational and philosophical themes. Some also have seen parallels between Rabelais and the works of Salman Rushdie from books like Midnight's Children. Can't comment on that because I haven't read enough of Rushdie, but I'm confident that that is comparable based on what I've read and heard. So you can see that Rabelais is sort of setting a certain kind of a template that others will exploit. Now, let's talk about some discussion questions. These are just discussion starters, and they're very open-ended. You can journal about them, you can talk about them in a book group or an online forum if you want, or just respond in the comments. There's sort of two different schools of education that are described in the Gargantua volume. The first is the mode of education where you do a lot of memorizing of old books and you don't do much physical exercise at all. The second approach has to do with reading, exercising, and talking about new ideas. So you're not just thinking about the old tradition, you're also bringing in the new. Which parts of this new school of learning do you use in your life or schooling today? Which did Rabelais like better and why? Also, you get a lot of discussion of wars in these volumes. The big war in the Gargantua volume, the Picrocholo Wars, starts over an argument about food. And what lesson do you think Rabelais wants us to learn about why real wars often start? And very interestingly, towards the end of the Gargantua, we have this utopian community of Thelem that's described. And they had one main rule in this society: do what you will, or do what thou wilt, do what you want. Why did Rabelais decide to build a place that had no rules, but also where only educated, polite people were invited? If you could live in a place such as that with only one simple rule, what would the rule of life be? Do you think that the people who live in Thelem are truly free? Why or why not? And is this society truly utopian? What are the implied conditions of entry that make this freedom possible? Is Rabelais an elitist or a realist about human nature? So you can really dig into those later chapters about this Abbey of Thelem and pair this discussion of his utopia with other utopian forms of literature. That might be something we do down the line. Turning to the Pantagruel, book 2, Pantagruel is depicted as a wise giant, and his sidekick, Panurge, is often smart, but he's a very messy, erratic troublemaker, a rascal. Why do you think Pantagruel keeps Panurge as his best friend? And what does Panurge add to Pantagruel's life? You might think of an echo here. I don't know if anyone's made this comparison to Shakespeare, but the Henry plays of Shakespeare, where he has Falstaff, the bawdy sidekick, comic genius at his side. I think there might be a parallel here. Think about your own friendships. Have you ever been friends with someone who's very different from you? What is the most important quality that you look for in a friend? And what can you learn about friendship from reading about this friendship in Rabelais? Rabelais mixes very serious discussions like law and learning with lots of silly jokes and eating and bodily humor. Why do you think he chose to put these two very different things together in the same book? Is there a comic formula at play there? Do you think the main point of his book is to teach you a specific lesson? Is it to satirize his society? Or is it simply to make you think and to laugh? Those are a few questions about Rabelais to get you going. And again, we only read books 1 and 2 from this volume. It keeps going. I just love Rabelais. Some of the chapters are hard to get through because he's just riffing like a jazz improv master and just reveling in all these runs that he can take. and you have to be patient reading him. Not everything's going to make sense, but it's just like riding a bucking bronco or catching a wave and like sort of surfing and trying to ride that wave through the pipeline for as long as you can. That's Rabelais. I mean, just go along for the ride and enjoy it. It is a real literary feast, a very unique book. If people only knew what were in these great books, they would get it. They would get it. They would just realize there's such variety of writing here. And wow, you read people like Aristophanes and Rabelais and Sterne, and you realize how much entertainment there is out there. You will be flashing on Monty Python, I think, for sure. I know I was. Anyway, what are your thoughts about Rabelais? Have you tried them? What do you think? What do you think about the vulgarity question? Is it acceptable? Were you bothered by that at all? Would Rabelais be canceled in today's society? I don't know. They tried to cancel him during the Renaissance, but somehow he managed to keep going. Anyway, let's talk about the next stage on the journey through the 10-year reading plan. We're in year 1 still, moving at a pretty slow pace. We're going to move on to Montaigne, another Frenchman, and read a selection of his essays. So we have the essays of custom and not easily changing an accepted law, of pedantry, of the education of children. It is folly to measure the true and false by our own capacity, of cannibals, that the taste of good and evil depends in large part on the opinion we have of them, and on some verses of Virgil. So that looks like about 6 or 7 essays to read by Montaigne, from that classic work, the man who basically invented the essay genre. And I'm excited to revisit my old friend Montaigne with you on the next stage of this reading plan. Please bookmark the playlist for this 10-year plan, and if you can always watch the old episodes and kind of read these in any order you want, really. But that's the point of doing these videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you come back and watch the channel again really soon. Bye-bye.